Hello and a very warm welcome, not just to Wine Blast, but to a show we look forward to making every year, our Wines of the Year Jamboree, where we take a not always entirely serious look back over the past year and raise many a glass in the process.
Yeah, we've got news and views for you. We've got the hardy perennial that is the guess, the missing word in the wine headline. Beethoven is involved, I can confirm, this year. We're going to be hearing from you, our fabulous listeners. And of course, we're going to be revealing our top wines of the year, culminating in the ultimate accolade, Wine of the Year. Watty, this is one not to miss.
So buckle up, because here we go. Now, we do always make a point of starting these shows with something serious and proper, just so we can pretend this is all very professional and educational. And in this context, the OIV has been reflecting on the last 100 years of wine, putting together some intriguing data about wine production and consumption from 1924 to 2024.
Yeah, now, if you were a cynic or a serial skim reader, I'm not making any specific accusations here, but you might go away from this report saying something like plus ça change, because, a brief glance at the graphs, which I did initially, I'll be really honest, I'll hold my hands up, things like vineyard surface area, wine production, wine consumption could give the impression that, everything basically grew wine-wise up until the late 1970s, early 1980s, which was sort of the boom time. Then everything fell back to reach a level now that's just very slightly above where things were in the 1920s. So, you could sort of say, is this a bit of a non-story, really?
I think that would be to miss the devil that's in the detail, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it be? In reality, the wine world has changed a lot in the last 100 years. First up, wine has gone from being overwhelmingly Eurocentric to thoroughly global. I mean, take consumption. In the 1920s, over 90% of wine was consumed in Europe. Nowadays, wine is officially drunk in 194 countries, and the big story has been the rise in consumption in North America and Asia. These days, for example, the US is the biggest wine consumer in the world.
Yeah. That's a big change.
It's a change.
That is
it's a huge change.
Big change, isn't it? And then you've got things like international trade in wine, which has also risen, I guess, in tandem. In the 1920s, only around 10% of all wine was exported. So very little sort of left. These days, half of all wine is consumed outside its country of origin. So, we're talking about essentially a precious commodity with a vibrant global trade. That's really interesting. That's big change. So, back in the 1920s, Africa was the biggest exporter of wine. Probably, just thinking about it, much of that was probably Algerian or Moroccan, wasn't it? To kind of beef up Burgundy back then. But in recent years, it's been countries like Chile, Argentina, Australia, New Zealand that have kind of led the charge of this drive to export. Yeah.
So yes, the overall figures rose up to the 70s and have fallen back since. But a fair amount of that will have been oceans of cheap plonk, pretty out of step with the modern world. So the wine world is adjusting, and not just to shifting consumption trends, but also things like climate change. As the OIV concludes, and I quote, "Production and consumption are in constant evolution, but the wine sector is not only a long-term sector, it's also highly resilient, underpinned by truly global reach."
Yeah, that's worth noting in passing, is that the OIV's forecast for the 2024 global wine harvest is for the smallest potential output since 1961. It's worth just mentioning that, isn't it?
Yeah.
But, because of what the OIV tersely describes as a range of weather events affecting production volumes around the globe, exacerbated by economic and market circumstances. So, this sort of painful transition continues.
Well, shall we distract ourselves then from the pain with some cute animals? Or maybe not so cute. Maybe not so cute. Either way, this is the headline that alcohol consumption is abundant in the natural world. Perhaps more common than we'd originally thought, beyond the odd confused moose or wobbly elephant. This is a review entitled The Evolutionary Ecology of Ethanol, and it basically says that humans are not drinking alone.
That's a very comforting feeling, isn't it?
It is.
I love that.
Caring and sharing.
It's thought that ethanol, or alcohol, first became abundant around 100 million years ago when flowering plants began producing sugar-rich fruits, sap and nectar that yeast could then ferment. Most of the time, we're talking pretty low levels in nature, aren't we? Sort of 1 to 2% ABV when a fruit falls off a tree and starts fermenting, whatever. But you can get over 10% alcohol by volume in some instances. Apparently in palm fruit, for example, you can get those sort of levels of alcohol concentration. And it seems that evolution has fine-tuned this ability for animals to metabolize alcohol just like we do.
Tree shrews and primates are particularly well adapted to efficiently metabolize alcohol, apparently. But the question is why? What is it about alcohol that works for animals? Because the risk is, of course, you get drunk, fall out of your tree and suffer the consequences.
We've all been there. We've all been there, falling out of a tree. Suffering adverse consequences. Even the police.
But anyway, there's got to be a reason to do it. And this is what the researchers want to look into. Is it just about calories? We're talking very ripe, sugar-rich foods here. Or is there a medicinal benefit? For example, fruit flies lay their eggs in substances containing ethanol to protect against parasites. Or, more intriguingly, is there a social benefit of animals becoming relaxed and playful?
Relaxed and playful. Nailing the wine blast vibe right there. That's what we do best. This is reminding me of that book we cited in our previous, when we had that. It was a pretty intense debate, wasn't it, about wine and health just a few episodes ago. And the book was called Drunk, wasn't it, by Edward Slingerland, where he argues that alcohol's not just, a bit of fun, but actually vital for human society to function, which is why we still have it. It's why we seek it out. Could it be similar, I guess, in the animal world? Interestingly, it makes me think there was another study out recently about one species, I think it was the oriental hornet, something like that anyway, for whom alcohol doesn't seem to touch the sides. They can metabolize alcohol up to 80% ABV without any problem whatsoever. So they nectar and fruit and carry, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, the brewer's yeast in their stomach. So, they come across ethanol regularly and it just doesn't seem to affect their behavior or lifespans at all. They can't get drunk, in other words. They are hard as nails.
Oh, to be an oriental hornet. But, maybe...
Yeah, so let's just dwell on that thought for a second. I'm pretty happy as I am, actually. But,
have you met any oriental hornets? I bet they're really happy too.
They're all hard
maybe
drinkers.
Happier than us.
They're too hard drinkers for me.
But, maybe insects are already masters of social cooperation and interaction and don't need any help on that front.
That's a very good point.
They'll just use the sugar and move on. While us naturally aggressive, individualistic primates do need a bit of help. Either way, this is a fascinating area of study. We can't wait to hear more. Hopefully, it could shed some light on how and why alcohol is important in nature and also with us humans too.
Yeah, cheers to that. So moving from nature to history, but sort of keeping the cute animal theme, albeit desperately tangentially, I want to pick up on the headline, Did the extinction of the dinosaurs pave the way for grapes? And this is a paper in Nature Plants suggesting that after the asteroid hit the Earth and wiped out most dinosaurs about 66 million years ago, this then allowed forests to flourish, a development which favoured climbing plants like our beloved vines. Not only that, but the disappearance of the dinosaurs also allowed mammals and birds to diversify, which then helped spread the grape seeds, again helping vines thrive.
So dinosaurs nil, wine one, eh? Yep.
Small price to pay, I think.
Yes, so this theory was based on new grapeseed fossils, wasn't it? Found in South America dating back between 19 and 60 million years. It suggests that vines have a complex history of dispersal and extinction, but essentially they seem to have thrived after the dinosaur extinction. But researchers also point to the fact that while plants like vines are resilient, they can disappear from entire continents, which is concerning given the potential ramifications of climate change.
Yeah, okay, so I'd like to segue neatly from dinosaurs to dinner in one seamless move with a good news story of how smoke-tainted Pinot Noir has found a new use as barbecue sauce.
I love this.
Now, we're all
so
painfully aware, aren't we, of how damaging smoke taint can be. We touched on this in our recent Wine Faults episode. We even discussed it in our very first Wine Blast episode when Australia had been hit by horrendous wildfires, and Clonakilla, that famous producer, for example, declined to release any 2020 wines because of smoke taint. So, it is a really serious issue.
And it also, it seems to be on the rise given the way climate change is affecting the planet with more extreme events. So there's lots of research going on as to how to prevent or minimise or deal with the negative effects of smoke taint. But in the meantime, one enterprising Oregon winery has turned 800 cases of its prime Pinot into a barbecue sauce that apparently, and I quote, has hints of allspice and clove and pairs perfectly with all your favourite grilled and smoked foods. They say, from slow-cooked pork baby back ribs to charcoal grilled salmon or mushrooms, it's sure to make your next backyard barbecue a tasty one.
I'm sure it is. So you can buy Durant Pinot Noir barbecue sauce for $12 American.
I want to try this.
So do I. And 5% of proceeds are donated to the local Dayton Fire Department. The website sums it up as from ashes to excellence. I love that marketing strapline. But, there is a serious point here too, isn't there? The 2020 wildfires in Oregon had a huge impact. About 4,900 square kilometres burned and more than 5,000 homes were destroyed. Owner Paul Durant said, "I'm just glad we found a use for the wine and it's a fun pivot after what was a very stressful event in 2020. It's our way of making the most out of a challenging situation."
Well, sticking with the food theme, we did come across an intriguing piece in the New Scientist entitled, "Can I Eat Myself Drunk? Man versus Sherry Trifle."
I would so love to have done this as well. A guinea pig. Next one, please. Put me forward.
Now, this is a piece challenging the received wisdom that the alcohol we add to food tends to either burn off or somehow evaporate from our beef bourguignon or sherry trifle.
Yeah, so writer Graham Lawton cites research showing that while ethanol does indeed have a lower boiling point than water, I think we all know that, it's about 78.5 degrees centigrade, which I didn't know, but there we go, there it is. It's rare that no alcohol will be left in a dish it's used in, even if it's been cooked for a long time. So he set up an experiment. Could he, and I quote, eat himself drunk?
We have to say it's not the most scientifically rigorous of experiments, is it?
Not,
I mean, he tries chorizo flambéed in what looks to be a pretty generous quantity of rum, for example, and he makes sure he mops up all the liquid with some bread. So you'd assume there's still a fair amount of booze in that.
Yeah, so.
His Portuguese fish stew with white wine was cooked covered, which again you'd think would help retain some of the alcohol. And his sherry trifle had a booze-laced syllabub topping. So all in all, I think he was kind of stacking the deck somewhat in his favour.
A little bit. There was a lot of booze in that food. But equally, I'm not really sure you can eat yourself drunk either. I mean, what do you think? Drunk? I mean, he does say he felt a bit sort of lightheaded, woozy-headed after eating his boozy food. But I think that's a bit different from drunk, isn't it, really?
Yeah,
The
probably.
amount you need to eat to actually get properly drunk.
Yeah, that's a lot of syllabub.
You have to go to pretty extreme levels, I think. Anyway, all that said, it is clear from, he was using his breathalyzer as he went along that he is regularly way over the drink drive limit just from eating this food. So, that's definitely something to be aware of. If you're travelling for a special occasion and they're serving boozy food, just be aware. Don't let your relatives foist that massive brandy butter on it. Just beware. It's the perfect excuse, finally.
Oh, yeah, I think we might have to avoid my mum's gravy from here on in.
Mum's gravy. Drink lots of water. Give it time. And be very wary of driving after. Intriguing
stuff. Anyway, just one final news story before we move on, and it's that the robots are coming for wine. Not to drink all our precious bottles, but to help us make the stuff by doing some of the hard work in the vineyard, for example. There are various different projects on the go that have been reported recently. Moet and Chandon employing an autonomous spraying robot in their champagne vineyards is one. They note its ease of use, operator safety and effectiveness in managing difficult terrain.
It's probably way better than me in terms of managing difficult terrain, especially after a glass
or
of wine.
effectiveness, frankly.
Well, wait, excuse me. Are you going to replace me? Okay, yeah. The next season of Wine Blast, I'm good. Peter is going to be a robot. So it's much better, much more on it. Is all I'm going to say. But yeah, it's also happening in the UK. Cambridge-based company Autopicker is aiming to create a robot that can harvest grapes and help with canopy management. The new robot is called Vinny. And it will apparently be able to distinguish between ripe and unripe grapes. And the idea is to help vineyard managers with labour challenges without sacrificing quality and attention to detail. That's their quote.
And Vinny also has rivals. Another project in the UK is being led by Extend Robotics to develop a grape-picking robot equipped with visual sensors powered by AI to determine which grapes are properly ripe, and which is being controlled by a pilot wearing a virtual reality headset. Now, this project is being developed in conjunction with Saffron Grange Winery in Essex, which says one eventual possibility could be 24-hour harvest routines, whereby once the Essex day shift has knocked off picking the grapes, skilled labourers in Australia could dial into the VR controls and pilot the robots by night. Now, this could mean more efficient, swift harvests and less losses to pest or diseases or adverse weather events at vintage time.
Yeah, and I suppose you could do it in reverse as well. You know, labourers in the UK helping Australia, given the way the kind of time difference is so complementary. But yeah, I don't know, to be honest, I'm not sure how I really feel about all this. You know, if it may well be taking jobs away from real people. And I don't know, somehow wine made by robots just doesn't feel quite right, does it? I don't know.
I mean, there's not the wine being made at the moment. It's just the picking, isn't it?
Yeah, but, you know, I guess if it is difficult to get the labour, which it is, especially at the right times, and it helps you make better wine, I don't know, maybe there's a place for it in the wider
and
wine
we've got
mix.
mechanical harvesters anyway, haven't we?
We
So
do.
it's just
do you
think it's worse than that?
I don't know. I don't know. What do you guys think? Let us know. Write in. We'd be interested to hear your thoughts. And it may be just as long as there's a red line in terms of as long as they don't start drinking the stuff. Whatever. I don't know.
Tipsy robots. Anyway, okay, right. We come on to our Guess the Missing Word in the headline game. And I'm going to start first. So here we go. Free bottle of wine hidden in what?
Sherry trifle. It's on my mind. I've got sherry trifle on my mind. I'm not getting it off my mind. In a free bottle of wine hidden in a Christmas tree.
Hidden in a Christmas tree?
Maybe that's, again, my wish fulfillment coming through here. I don't know, where would you get free wine? In the best treasure hunt ever?
I'm
kind of struggling here.
It's a better treasure hunt than I've ever done. So, free bottle, not quite as exciting, free bottle of wine hidden in small print. So, bear with me. So this is the story about tax policy associates.
Of course it is. I mean, what else would it be about? Of course it's about tax policy associates.
Anyway, they're a UK firm. Well, they've got a good sense of humour. A UK firm that offered a free bottle of wine to the first person who found the offer, which was hidden in their website privacy policy. Now, it apparently took 3 months for someone to claim the freebie, something the company says vindicates the point of the exercise, which was to prove that nobody reads these things. You know, for what it's worth, the bottle was a £35 Pomerol, which is quite nice. And owner Dan Needle admitted the stunt was a childish protest against all businesses having to publish said privacy policies, which is time and money wasted in his view. He added that the winner had actually kind of cheated anyway, given they were only reading his privacy policy in the first place because they were writing their own.
So it totally vindicates, it totally bears his point out. Hilarious. So my turn. Okay. Did wine make Beethoven what?
Oh. Towering genius. I'm sure it's more exciting than that. Even more grumpy than he already was because he was constantly hungover.
He was famously grumpy,
Beethoven.
Of course.
Oh, no. I mean, presumably this is to do with him going deaf.
Stop getting it right all the time. Goodness me.
It
is absolutely, you know. No, of course, there is that famous and probably apocryphal story of Beethoven's last words being pity, pity, too late. I think we might have said that on the podcast before. You know, that was about a case of wine arriving as he's on his deathbed and it's getting there too late. Brilliant. But no, this was a study from Harvard University that Beethoven's famous later life deafness may have come on, not because of syphilis, not going
No
to
comment.
comment on that,
No comment.
or even loud music, but because of lead poisoning from wine. Locks of Beethoven's hair apparently showed lead levels around 90 times what's normal. And now that could have been partly caused by sort of eating fish from the polluted Danube or lead-based wig powder, but there's evidence of Beethoven's doctors sort of repeatedly advising him to cut back on wine. And some wine historically was plumbed, so had lead substances added to it to make it taste sweeter, to make it look clearer and last longer. It was also a preservative. So, the Harvard researchers don't think wine killed Beethoven, but it may have made him deaf. So there you go.
Okay, so I've got a final bonus one for you. Oldest wine discovered mixed with what?
Oh, well, Coke. It's obviously Coke, Coca-Cola, to make a calimocho. Of course.
Not actually far off, because there is a Spanish connection here. Now, this is a 2,000-year-old wine discovered in a Roman burial urn in Andalusia, southern Spain, and it was mixed with ashes. In other words, cremated human remains. Probably in some sort of burial ritual. Yeah. But the funny bit was when the University of Cordoba expert analysing the wine was asked if he'd considered taking a sip, he answered, "It has spent 2,000 years in contact with the cremated remains of a dead Roman. But it's not toxic, so you could filter it and try it. I'd rather someone else tried it first, though."
Oh, that is brilliant. Yeah, fantastic. I love that. Hey, someone else can do it first. Anyway, so on that bombshell, it's time to take a breath. I definitely need one. Because coming up, we're going to be hearing your views and questions and announcing our wines of the year. To recap so far, wine has become a precious global commodity in the last 100 years, and alcohol is more abundant and perhaps useful in nature than we previously thought. Plus, you should always check the small print.
Now, thanks to all of you who have been in touch. We love it when you do that, particularly when it's funny. So let's start off on a light-hearted note with a speak pipe message sent by the inimitable Bevis Sidney, whose love of puns and wordplay must be almost as great as his love of wine. Here he is with a virtuoso riff on 80s pop song puns that he came up with after listening to our episode on wine faults.
Susie, Peter, legends. Just binge listened to Tainted Love Pod. Props to you both for the 80s pop wordplay there. Nice nod to Band Aid too, and Farley Jackmaster Funk. Then Peter snuck In Excess in twice. Classy and subtle. But you missed these. Spoiler alert, these are neither classy nor subtle. Wet, wet, wet cardboard. Ian Jury and the Block Drains. YMTCA, 1978, but who's counting? Aztec Cameraldehyde. Britain and Miami Sound Machine. Methyl Captain Sensible. Feel I should quit while I'm behind. Speak pipe out.
If we had a gong for Speak Pipe Message of the Year, Bevis, you just won it, hands down. So, following our episode on red wine headaches, Luca Hodgkinson got in touch from Chile to thank us because his mother-in-law has reactions to his red wines and now he knows why. I'm very glad to help out with mothers-in-law, always, Luca. He also speculated that natural wines may be more likely to give red wine headaches given a low sulfur regime may produce more acetaldehyde to add to that produced in the body, and which was obviously leading to the headaches for some people. It was the cause. So could be, Luca, could be. I don't know. Very possible though. It probably depend on the wine and on the person, but definitely worth bearing in mind.
Now, Peggy Bowden sent a message from Italy, also on the subject of red wine headaches, wondering if traditional vine training systems such as pergola, common in places like Valpolicella, would help reduce the incidence of red wine headaches, given this system shades the fruit hanging beneath it, so produces less quercetin. Could this be another answer to lowering quercetin levels in grapes while retaining quality? Quite possibly, Peggy. The downside is, of course, the vineyard work becomes harder and more laborious, but it might also work well in sunny areas that are getting warmer because of climate change. So, yes, that is a possibility, I'd say, and thank you, Peggy.
Yeah, and James Agnew wrote from Australia in response to our Hunter Valley pod to say, whilst I've not been a huge podcast person, I've found myself deep diving into your previous episodes, hooked on how effortlessly enjoyable and seriously informative they've all been. You have converted me. So there we go. We are converting people to the cause. Love that. Thank you, James. And then Adam S. Montefiore, who helped us research our Wine and War episode featuring winemaker voices from Palestine, Lebanon and Israel, wrote to say, I loved your analogy of a field blend and Susie's idea that each individual vine contributes to a result that's greater than the sum of its parts. Each interview in this episode stood alone, but we are much more interesting together than apart. Great job. Wonderful idea. Thank you.
Now, following on from our most recent episode on resistant vines, including peewees, Julie Benz got in touch to suggest surplus whey, which is a byproduct of yoghurt making, among other things, as an alternative treatment for powdery mildew, something she tested on her scabiosas. Lou Bosch also got in touch to thank us for an informative podcast about peewees, but politely reminded us not to be chemophobic or anti-sprays, saying, I think being open-minded and using the best tools for achieving the goal are in the end a more sustainable way of working.
And then Marco Nardi from Caractère restaurant in Notting Hill slipped into our Instagram DMs to give us some really interesting feedback on peewee wines. So in the show, if you remember, we'd said that these wines are not very well known for now, but if people do learn about them, for example, if they're hand sold in restaurants, they could do well. So Marco got in touch to say the following. I've been listening to your podcast since the beginning, and it's my favourite wine podcast by far. I'm so happy you did an episode on peewees. I'm the only restaurant in London with a selection of peewees from Nicola Biasi, who we had on the show. I started back in March. It's working incredibly well. I even used some in the pairing with the tasting menu. The general reaction is positive. The wines are very versatile in terms of food pairing. Plus, they carry with them the fascinating enigma of the unknown, which, if explained well, captures people's attention. It's still mostly hand selling, but in the past couple of weeks, I've had customers starting to ask unprompted for, and I quote, the peewee wine you have by the glass, which I see very much as a win.
That is great news, isn't it? I mean, really interesting. Thank you, Marco. And Caractère is the one we've heard good things about, isn't it? By Emily Rue and Diego Ferrari.
Absolutely, Emily being Michelle's daughter, and they're doing brilliant things in her own right. And it's so many reasons to go there now.
Absolutely. Now, I'm very aware we need to get on with our wines of the year, but just to finish off on our wonderful listener input, I'd like to cite a couple of particular reviews that have really touched us. Firstly, 5 stars on Apple Podcasts from Johan_747 in Hong Kong, who says, amazing, most practical and insightful wine podcast you can find in this world.
In this world. I wonder what our sort of intergalactic podcast competition is. It makes me think. Anyway, thank you very much, Johan.
And then another 5 stars from Madam S. Toperum in Turkey, who writes, I absolutely love this show and have been listening to it for about a year now. The episodes never disappoint. They're packed with knowledge, humour and love for life, because what is wine if not life? Susie and Peter, thank you for your work. Keep it up.
Thank you guys. You are what make this show happen. So please do keep up your great work at tuning in and writing those reviews and ratings. We really appreciate it. And it really does keep us going. Now, wines of the year. We are thirsty. Here we are. We're ready. As ever, we've had a very busy year tasting, hosting, traveling, filming, podcasting, of course. Have we ever even made time to do some actual drinking?
Oh, no, definitely not.
Working too hard.
No, never do that. Good
we've
Lord.
had loads of super impressive wines, things like Yquem 2001, Sandeman 1963, Barcavalia 1985, Harlan 2012, Dom Perignon Rosé 2002, Senya 98, Sassicaia 2021, Grange 2013. Stop me when I'm getting insufferable. Boring. I'll stop then.
Stop.
But these are not our wines of the year.
No, because with our wines of the year, we try to choose bottles and producers that aren't just the most celebrated names or biggest price tags. We prefer to go for wines that are, well, first and foremost, available to buy, ideally aren't crazy expensive, but which we've tasted and that have moved us in some way. So I'm going to kick us off with our value wine of the year. And this is a tie, actually. It's between the Errázuriz Estate Reserva Pinot Noir 2023, which is around £9, but it's often on offer. For example, at the moment it's $6.99 at Majestic. And then our second value wine is the Morande Terrarum Patrimonial Semillon 2023, $9.99 at Waitrose.
Yeah, two amazing value wines. You know, we had as our top value picks in our Chili Wines of the Year 2024 podcast and report, didn't we? We would heartily urge you to go out, fill your boots while stocks last. These are two sensational wines for under 10 quid. A really elegant, savoury Pinot and a kind of refreshing, intense white. You know, if you do want more info, check out the podcast and the report, which is available on our website. But really great wines. You know, time we all need to save some money.
Well, and then one other one I did want to flag up in the value context was the Waitrose Champagne Brut non-vintage, and it's $24.99. And this is one I loved when I tasted supermarket own label champagnes blind for the Christmas edition of Which magazine. It's made by Alexander Bonnet in the Aube, and it's 90% Pinot Noir, so it's rich and rounded and yeasty, really lovely, and really nice. Good value champagne.
Okay, so next up is our left field wine of the year. Always a fun category. We had some pretty eclectic wines in our Chili Wines of the Year, including a Fino Sherry lookalike made from Old Vine Semillon, which was the Carmen Florian number 6, and a Skin Contact Ancestral White Blend from Itata, from Ana Maria Comsilla, her Payines 2018. But this year, our left field vote goes to the Westwell Pinot Meunier Multi-Vintage, a delicious, quirky, so quirky this wine, isn't it? Seriously yeasty, savoury, sort of bready, bruised apple, creamy. I mean, just a sort of wacky English fizz that's utterly gorgeous, and around £42.50 from the winery.
Yeah, I mean, we tasted this blind when we were chairing the Wine GB Awards this year, and it's safe to say it caused a fair bit of consternation and animated discussion.
That's
didn't
what we're going
it?
to call it, yeah. But it did end up with a major award, which tells you everything you need to know.
It really did.
The vintages in question are 2019, 2020 and 2021. A small portion of fruit from these vintages fermented spontaneously. Then in 2021, the fermenting juice was added to the base wine and bottled when the correct sugar level was reached. It was then disgorged with zero dosage. It's a bit mad, but it's beautiful.
So, moving on to our producer of the year, which is Fernando Mora.
Yes.
Garnacha Samurai, who we featured on our Going Gaga for Garnacha episode, producer of exquisite wines at Bodegas Frontonio and Cuevas de Arom. He's a great thinker, a great winemaker, and a great person. You know, we'd recommend all his wines without hesitation. So elegant, so perfumed, so characterful, so rewarding. You know, check them out.
Yeah, also in the mix for that award were Rias Baixas producers Pathos Señorans and Atis, both of whom were insanely impressive when we did our podcast on that beautiful region. So well done to them too. And now we're going to move on to our fizz of the year. Probably your favourite category, one of your favourite categories.
Definitely one.
Although I do think maybe we should call it sparkling wine of the year so it can be swatty. Anyway, our fizz of the year is the delectable Aigli Ourier Les Prémices Extra Brut non-vintage. We had a fascinating time talking to the Aiglis for our Grower Champagne pod. Their wines are off the charts, and this is one of their most accessible wines price-wise, without sacrificing any of that gorgeous flavour or elegance or complexity that they have.
No. I mean, it is a stunning wine. And our tastings for that episode, I definitely earmarked at the time as having potential wines of the year quality, because I felt it was one of the best tastings I'd done for quite a while. And this wine is gorgeous. It's so full of character, but also seamless, savoury, joyful, I wrote. Yeah. And what is better than that? What could be better than that?
Totally agree. Honourable mentions also go to the Henri Giraud MV19, which is fabulous. He used it in your Wine Masters filming, and I showed it at a masterclass. The new Danbury Ridge Solstice, the Extant Park BBB 2015, and the Kits Coty Cœur de Cuvée 2016 that won the Supreme Champion at the Wine GB Awards. Right, we're coming up to the big gongs now. Need to do a few lunges, a few stretches. Next up is White Wine of the Year. What have you got for us?
Well, so we travelled a fair bit in 2024 to many places around the world, but one particularly memorable visit was to a cooperative cellar in southern France, where we had a tasting that reduced us to silence, didn't it? And this was
Quite
Cave Flores, and the tasting was a vertical of their relatively new Picpoul de Pinet Selection, a wine that combines freshness with depth and gravity and complexity and texture and age-worthiness. It's a new dimension for Picpoul.
Yeah, and it's part of a bigger story too, because this wine is part of a new category that not many people are aware about yet. A few years ago, some Picpoul producers got together and said, our wine's pretty popular, but it's famous for being cheap and cheerful white, right? Picpoul Pinot. What about putting our best wines into a different bottling to show how good it can really be? So they created what's called the Patience category for separate bottlings of their most intense, complex, age-worthy wines. Incidentally, they don't age them in oak. They're just sort of wines with more intensity.
And that's what this wine is, isn't it? It's the Flores Picpoul de Pinet Selection 2021. It looks cool. It's amazing value for this level of wine. It's about $17.99 from Wickham's, and it's a great story too. So buy. That's what we'd say. But we'd also throw in a couple of other whites into the mix as worthy runners-up. The Virey Classé 2021 by Héritier du Conlafon is a delicious white Burgundy that's not just for plutocrats.
Yeah, it's quite a rare one that's white Burgundy is actually affordable.
Affordable.
Decent, isn't it?
And we were also blown away by the Gloria Reynolds Art and Tradition 2007 from the Alentejo when we tried it ahead of our masterclass at this year's Vinho de Caja event in Lisbon. It's golden and complex, powerful. I mean, just stunning. Stunning.
Stuff of dreams. So good it even made us sing and dance.
Well, that's not so good, is it?
Check out the video evidence if you don't know what I mean. Moving swiftly on to our red wine of the year. So many options here. For example, one we got here, the Errázuriz Don Maximiano 2021. It just seemed to follow us round this year, this wine, like a good charm.
It did.
A lucky charm.
Yeah.
It was our top red in our Chile Wines of the Year 2024. I also then showed it as part of an Errázuriz vertical masterclass where we tasted back to the rather lovely 1984 Don Max, one of the first ones. And then it was also on pour at the event where we won our 67 Pall Mall Global Wine Communicator Award for this very podcast, wasn't it? Which was a very big moment in our year,
it
wasn't
was
it?
A big
meant
moment.
so much.
Yeah. We're showing off a bit now, aren't we?
Essentially, this is an absolutely stunning new wave Chilean Cabernet blend. So elegant, perfumed. It's right up there. What a gorgeous wine.
But then there's the gorgeous 2019 Côte Rôtie Terrasse by Jean-Luc Jamet that I tried recently and I loved. There's the beautiful Masté Capitale Fougère range that we loved when we were in France.
Yeah.
The delicious Hencote Pinot Noir 22 from Shropshire and the wonderful Crystalum Peter Max Pinot Noir 2023 from South Africa. Yeah. So quite a lot of options.
But there can be only one,
can.
as the Highlander famously says. And so we have gone for one. It is the utterly bewitching, scented, ethereal, resonant wine that is the by far Farside Geelong Pinot Noir 2021. We absolutely adore by Far's wines. We never taste them and are not seduced. They're stunning. This one is the most affordable one of their range that we can try. The Sangreal and RP are also gorgeous, but a bit more expensive. And you can get it for about £57 a bottle in the UK if you hunt around, which I know it sounds crazy, but it's a bargain to our mind.
It's just a gorgeous wine, an outstanding producer. On which note, we only have one gong left, our wine of the year. How can we possibly top all of this? Well, it's a producer we have huge regard for. They do amazing things in a part of the world that's not always the most celebrated or recognised. They bang the drum for quality, for value, for wines with character and individuality. And whenever we try their wines, we smile.
Oh, yes. And this wine in question, which we have right here, is very special. It's a wine that went wrong.
It's true.
But the persistence, some might say bloody-mindedness of the winemaker paid off. This is a wine that shouldn't exist, basically. Legally, it occupies dubious territory. In wine terms, it's an outlier. It's a maverick. It's a kind of rogue player that follows no one's lead but its own.
So, without further ado, our wine of the year for 2024 is a Greek epic. And it is the Apostolos Thymiopoulos Blanc de Rosé Zinamavro 2009.
Boom. There you go.
So the story is as follows. The fruit comes from a high-altitude vineyard in Phthia. It was originally made as a rosé, but its colour dropped out, and the Zinamavro failed to complete its initial fermentation because of the unbelievably cold winter of 2009. But rather than throw winemaking products at it, winemaker Apostolos Thymiopoulos did something different.
He did. As all the very best people do, he left the wine on its yeast lees in tank until 2015, letting it gain weight and complexity in the process. Fermentation never restarted. So in 2015, let's not forget, this is already 6 years after the harvest, he added a portion of ripe Malagozia to the wine and transferred it to 500-litre oak barrels, where it continued fermenting for another 2 years. It was finally bottled in 2020, so 11 years after the initial harvest. And the result is something totally different. It's just, I mean, in the glass, it's just sensational. It's golden. There's no other word for it. It just glints and glows.
It's almost orange, isn't it?
In the glass.
Incredible.
It's amazing. And then aromatically, you give it one sniff. It's unbelievably kind of lavish and exotic. It makes you think, what the hell? And then on the palate, you taste it, and it's got a fine, chalky texture, which obviously isn't sort of that normal for rosé or white, but and a sort of lovely warming spice on the finish.
And in terms of flavour, there are notes of ginger and dried fruits as well as fresh apricot. In the glass, it develops notes of acacia honey and buttery toast. I mean, it's utterly intriguing, gorgeous and delicious, but also really different.
Yes.
And in this sense, it's the perfect example of what we banged on about in our We Need to Talk About Rosé episode, where we made an impassioned plea for more rosé wines with character and individuality rather than bland identikit bottlings. Here is what we were asking for in a bottle, and it's glorious.
Yeah, totally. You know, I'd sort of describe it as it's kind of a sphinx of a wine. You know, it's in equal parts inscrutable and magnificent. It's both incredibly open and welcoming, but then it also makes you think, doesn't it? And you're absolutely on the money about a rosé with character. You know, this is a rosé that disproves the myth that rosé is just for easy summer quaffing. You know, this is a wintry rosé. It's complex and food friendly, and actually think about it, it's also probably the ultimate wine for a classic Christmas turkey meal, if that's on your agenda at any stage. What do you think?
Well said, yeah. And it looks gorgeous too, to pop on your table. A truly epic wine of the year. Now, we'd also flag up a couple of Thymiopoulos' other wines because they're such a good producer, and Zinamavro is such a cool grape. So they make a cheaper rosé, the Rosé de Zinamavro, which is $13.50, and which we enjoyed probably a bit too much when we were on our holiday in Rhodes last summer.
No comment.
Enough said. Sensational value wine.
Yeah, it's amazing value for that price. And their reds are really good too. So we've got one here, the Earth and Sky Nausa Zinamavro is beautifully fragrant and grippy. It's kind of like a cross between Barolo and Barbera, if that makes sense. If you like Pinot Noir or Piedmont wines, you have to try this. It is great value at 24 quid.
And then they also do have a cheaper red, the Zinamavro Jeune Vin 2022, which is $13.50 and is delicious, rustic, wild. It's like a sort of a great value Etna Rosso, a really rugged and just full of character.
So there we have it, our wines of the year 2024 done and dusted. Thank you for sharing it all with us. Likewise, thank you for sharing this year with us. We really couldn't do this without you. So now it's time to raise a glass and say, here's to 2025. And until next time, cheers.